Hi, this is Danielle Peterson with Wild Soul Living. Welcome to my channel. Love if you could subscribe. I will be posting many more videos to come. Today I wanted to briefly discuss chapter 4 in the book Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I'm going to be reading a little bit here and there, but the title of this chapter is A Hymn for the Wild Man, Manaway. And it's such a delightful story. It's a love story. It's a story of soul love. It's a story of this twin about these two sisters that represents the dualistic nature, the psyche of a woman, and how a woman holds both this civilized sense, but the civilized woman who is tamed is often very lonely, because there's also this wild side to her that doesn't want to be tamed, that just wants to be known. And so how this story goes is a story of two sisters, one who is what do they say? One is prettier and one is sweeter. And Manaway falls in love with both of them and asks their father if he could marry them. And the father says, yes, you can marry my daughters, but you must know their names. And so in this, our ancient culture, you know, the naming of a person is very important. It speaks to the essence. And so Manaway is so deeply in love with both of these sisters that he guesses and guesses their names, but doesn't get them right. And he goes back to his home, discouraged, but still madly in love with these sisters. He can't get them out of his mind. And Manaway had, in the story, Manaway has a dog. And what happens in the story, Manaway sends the dog, which is so brilliant, and that's the beauty of these stories, is the paradoxes and the metaphors in them. But the dog in the story represents a wild man's instinctual nature to want to sniff out his woman, this earthly woman, and he must know her. He must get to know her. So Manaway sends his dog, which represents the instinctual nature of himself. And how the story reads is the dog is peeking in the window, watching the sisters. One time they're combing their hair, and the next time they're putting on lotion. And what happens is the first time the dog learns their names and he gets to know them, and he's like all excited, like, I'm running back to my master, and I'm going to tell him the names, and this is great. But then the dog gets distracted. I think the first time it was food, and he was like, oh, I smell something, and he sniffs off and eats the food. And as he's like enjoying the tasty delight, he forgets their names. And then he goes back and I'm like, oh yeah, I got distracted. I'll go back tomorrow. I'll go back tomorrow and get to know their names. And then the next time, same thing happens. He gets distracted. He gets tantalized by other earthly desires. And again, he loses his focus and he forgets the sisters' names. And then finally, after this happens a few times, he starts to control, or my interpretation, he begins to control some of his primal urges, his impulses, as the archetype of the man, which is the dog. And the last one, there's a man, I believe, he comes out and attacks him, and the dog was like, you know, really wanting. He's like, no, this is important. And then the dog's all beat up, but he's like, I have the names, I didn't forget. And then the next day, Manaway goes and tells him the name, and then they get married, and they live happily ever after. Or not happily ever after, but kind of, it's more of how we all want to be known, and we all have these two different dualistic aspects of ourself. Not only, and that's the beauty of this story, because within the female, there's the civilized and lonely, and there's the wild and untamable, and the merging of within and without. And then for the male archetype, the man's longing for this unearthly woman, but how difficult it is for a man to really get to know the wild essence of a female. It takes a lot of work, and sometimes you do get distracted, and as a man, and how to be with, and how the primal instincts, the carnal, like, I need her, I want her, how that can serve you. It's the man's instinctual nature, and how he longs to know the wild woman. But a man gets distracted. So it's just a delightful story. There's a lot of richness to it. And so what I want to do is I want to pull out some passages, some quotes from this that really struck me. And I think I have the first edition of Women Who Run with the Wolves, and I know since then there has been many revisions. So I'm going to quote the page numbers for you, but just know that it might be off a page or two is what I have found. And so let's see. So here I'm on page 123, and she writes how Manaway guesses and guesses, but cannot guess the names of the twins with his mundane nature alone. The dog self acts in Manaway's service. Women often crave a mate who has this kind of endurance and the wit to continue trying to understand her deep nature. When she finds a mate of that substance, she will give lifelong loyalty and love. That really spoke to me. It's something that I've always craved. I can identify with aspects of my female self that there's value in being civilized. I can't embody my wild woman all the time and have healthy relationships, but at the same time, my deeper self, my wild self, does crave to be known, does crave to be wanted, does crave to be devoured. And so I think she nailed it as far as I'm concerned right there. So I really liked that part of it. And then here Still on page 123, she talks about the tenacious dog nature in a man. And I really like this. The little dog in the story shows how psychic tenacity works. And dogs are the magicians of the universe. By their presence alone, they can transform grumpy people into grinning people, sad people into less sad people, and they engender relationships. So I like that. So sometimes I think a dog-like nature of a man is kind of like impulsive, or you know, you're a dog kind of thing, just fetch, go get, and they're not really free thinkers. But there's also I like how she writes that they're magicians of the universe, showing some degree of unconditional love. You know, they keep on fetching, and they keep on, that's the ravishing part that I love. So the dog-like nature in a man really fulfills this longing inside me of my wild woman to be ravished, to be fetched, kind of thing. Let's see what else. And so this is the darker aspects of the dog-like nature, the seductive appetite. It's not by accident that men and women, she writes, men and women struggle to find the deeper sides of their natures, and yet they become distracted for a number of reasons, mostly pleasures of the various sorts. Some become addicted to those pleasures and stay forever entangled there and never continue with their work. The dog in the story is distracted by these appetites, and how to get in touch with these primal aspects of ourselves, these dog-like natures, but to also exercise a degree of control and what is important, what is the essence here, what actually matters, what are you longing for, and not to get distracted by what she calls our seductive appetite. Let's see. Oh, and then on page 126, I star another aspect of the appetite has assaulted the creature, and again drawing him from his task. And although his gut is satisfied, it's the soul's work is not done. You know, you can have these pleasurable experiences that can be life-changing, life-altering, but does it really satisfy the soul's longing? And so that's why I call this a soul love story. And then eventually he learns, and let me see, I think there's a couple other things. So here it's about talking about the interior aspects of the woman, which is the wild woman. And this is on page 128. If one overlooks a woman's dual nature and takes a woman at face value, one is in for a big surprise. For when the woman's wildest nature rises from her depth and begins to assert herself, she often has interest, feelings, and ideas which are quite different from those she expressed before. So how this relates to my story is I was once extremely civilized, and then I got in touch with my inner nature, my wild essence, and things shifted for me. And at first a little drastically, but eventually I found a degree of balance, and I'm continuing to find that balance. I'm not a complete master here, but I'm learning, and this is one of the powerful reasons why I'm doing this video and why I host a monthly book club to talk about this book, because I am continuously learning more and more and going deeper within myself. Yeah. And then the last I want to read to you is on page 129. Let's see. So it kind of talks about the wildish tasks of the man is to find their true names and not to misuse that knowledge to seize power over her, but rather to apprehend and comprehend the numinous substance from which she is made, to let it wash over him, amaze him, shock him, even spook him, and to stay with it and to sing out her names over her. It will make her eyes shine. It will make his eyes shine. I love that. And that is that intertwining of souls, the dualistic nature within, without, but then also how you can look to that for within a soul love relationship. I feel like there's one other thing that I wanted to share with you. But yeah, let me see. I don't know why I'm thinking there's... Oh, here it's on page 128. It says, to love a woman, the mate may also love her wildest nature. If she takes a mate who cannot or will not love the other side, she'll surely in some ways be dismantled and be left limp without repair. So this speaks about how women who are so more in touch with their civilized side, they can give up all of themselves for the men and feels lonely and doesn't feel very alive for the female. And so the key is to the man to really lean in and lean into his own instinctual nature and get to know this wild side, which sometimes is scary. It's scary, or it can. She's mysterious, she's chaotic, she's all those things, but she's so lovable. And when you find her, she is extremely, and know her, she's extremely loyal. So feel free to drop some comments and let me know what you think, what aspects of the story that you enjoyed, what aspects of this podcast that touched you or spoke to you. I'd love to hear from you, and please subscribe to my channel, and supporting what I do, and thanks. I will